today, we'll try to recall our ideals and visions. First of all, they wanted to found a school, and I quote, to assist the African in its aspiration for advancement and for a greater share in the government of this country. This was completely radical, 1927. Nobody was thinking about any African governing anything anywhere in the world. And then they were thinking about racial equality, that all may be one. This aspiration, and Dr. Agri used the piano symbols in apartheid South Africa, of all places, speaking to a white-only gathering. So this was a very bold, radical approach to the world. And the third radical thing was this co-education, men and women being educated under one roof in a boarding environment, not the girls and boys going from in a boarding environment. And this was long before gender equality and gender issues became a topic for the rest of the world. So as we prepare to talk about how we are going to have a vision for helping in the next 50 years or so, I hope that we'll be bold, imaginative, because these ideals were not imagined, were unimaginable, and it took a great leap of faith to be able to conceive the Achimota project. Christians wanting a school morally based, but non-denominational and non-religious. These days they try to tell us Achimota is a religious school. It was never meant to be.
The first thing I did when I received the invitation to speak at this event was to download plagiarism checking software. I thought it wise in today's copyright-conscious world. Unfortunately, when I ran my presentation through it, all it told me was that no matter what idea you come up with, someone, somewhere, has thought of it before you. So I have decided to protect myself against all charges of copyright infringement by stating from the outset that I am not sure which of the ideas I'll be presenting are my own. I bet you didn't know that in today's world, the average individual is exposed to 34 gigabytes of data each day from various sources. And so I hope you would forgive me if I am no longer too certain which ideas are mine and which I have borrowed. Mr. Chairman, let me say that it's a privilege to share the stage with people whom I hold in such high esteem, and I wish to thank the organizers for placing me in such sterling company. I'm actually reassured by the lineup of panelists, because indeed we have a very weighty matter to consider. What role will industry, business, and entrepreneurship play in shaping the Ghana of 2030? A very perplexing issue when you consider the fate of just one subsector of our economy selected for your consideration, because it is an amalgam of the characteristics of industry, business, commerce, and entrepreneurship. And I refer here to the textile industry. At its zenith, the textile subsector dominated the manufacturing sector in Ghana. In 1970, the 16 textile manufacturers employed 25,000 Ghanaians. Today, 50-something years on, there are only 4 players left in the industry, and they currently employ a mere 2,900 Ghanaians. In 2011, the ratio of imported textiles to exported textiles in Ghana stood at 125%, or we imported 25% more textiles than we exported. By 2015, the excess of imported textiles over exported stood at a staggering 827%. The only conclusion is that from where we stand today, textile manufacturing will not be making any further meaningful contribution to the nation's development. This is the sad state of affairs of a sector that once had the potential to catalyze the development of a very powerful supply network linking cotton farming to ginning, yarning, and spinning, and connecting to dye manufacturing, and then linking forward to artisanal seamstresses and tailors and industrial clothing makers serving export markets. The gravity of where this sector finds itself today should not be underestimated. Because when we promote the wearing of made in Ghana clothing, we could unwittingly be driving the demand for imported fabric of dubious legitimacy. Mr. Chairman, is the case of the Ghanaian textile subsector indicative of what the future holds for other sectors of our economy? Can we accurately predict what changes will define the world in which Ghana would find itself a few years from now? This is a challenging undertaking. History is full of examples of failures at predicting the shape and form of our world. We are told that in the early 1900s, an internal Western Union memo stated, and I quote, "This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us," end of quote. How wrong they were. In our own times, on the day before the Brexit referendum, 75% of all bets placed with Ladbrokes, the UK bookmakers, were odds on for a vote to remain in the EU. And of course, all the pundits were wrong about who was going to be the 45th president of the United States. The polls had him failing at the primaries and certainly losing in the main election. Apparently, only Nostradamus, who seems to have foreseen every major event of our times, and The Simpsons, allegedly in an episode in March 2000, accurately identified the rise of the Trump. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, the difficulty in predicting what lies ahead does not excuse any serious entity from the responsibility of trying to anticipate its future. It is only with a clear understanding of the future, as envisioned from a current position, that one can begin to contrive a strategy that will lead to a predetermined, unique, and desirable position in that future. Someone once described the future as a blank sheet of paper whose surface gets inscribed on with a story of outcomes, depending on the actions taken and the decisions made today. This feed-forward link between today and tomorrow is always on, and therefore, what the year 2030 will hold for Ghana will depend on our acts of commission or omission, our decisions or our indecision, our action or our inaction, our thoughtfulness or thoughtlessness, our carefulness or our carelessness, our priorities and our choices. Mr. Chairman, where Ghana would be in 2030 and what contribution industry, business, and entrepreneurs will make to getting to that goal will be critically dependent on where we, the nation, plan to be in 2030 and what we do between now and then. This we must do in order that we do not give truth to the words of the Osibisa hit. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We will know we are there. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Osibisa give us the reason why it is worth our while to project forward to the year 2030 and hopefully chart a course which will not only get us there, but will also ensure that as a nation, Ghana is relevant, desirable, prosperous, civilized, respected, and strong. It is our responsibility to deliver on this vision. The Ghana we aspire to create, no, the Ghana which it's our duty to deliver, belongs to our children and their children. Our generation must take action today that will ensure that our nation stands ready to once again lead the continent in actualizing the, in my opinion, hackneyed Africa Rising storyline. There is a phrase that I much rather prefer as a descriptor for the unique attributes of our dear nation. And I'm going to quote from a book, and nobody should accuse me of bootlicking. I came across this quotation in a book authored by Accra Kenforiata entitled Leadership, Entrepreneurship and Values. I had never heard the potential renaissance of Africa described so aptly. In a speech delivered at the Chatham House, Accra Oforiatta quotes Gaius Plinius Secundus, also known as Pliny the Elder, a Roman historian and one-time procurator of the African province of the Roman Empire, who said, and I quote, "Ex Africa, semper aliquid novi," end of quote. In English, for the younger ones in our midst, out of Africa, always something new. I'm sure you'll all agree that Africa is indeed the unique place of discovery, amazement, creativity, and the unexpected, both good and bad, that this phrase implies. Mr. Chairman, before I attempt to leap forward in time to explore our future, permit me to make some assumptions. The first is that I hope that we are all agreed that the Ghana of 2030 is the one I described earlier on. Relevant, desirable, prosperous, civilized, respected, and strong. Secondly, let's assume that the needs of industry, commerce, agriculture, services, and all productive units of the economy are, at a macro level, the same or similar, and are driven by the same factors and subject to similar stresses. Finally, grant me that every business, big or small, has entrepreneurial roots, and all businesses understand the importance of maintaining an entrepreneurial streak, no matter how far they may currently be from their entrepreneurial origins.
I just want to thank you for this opportunity, because I'm in the throes of a budget. And you are confronted with a budget deficit, which, if you begin to think rationally and normally, it becomes very difficult to think of the bold ideas as you try to balance the equation. But our president has stated that we need to move away from the gadgetsburg economy into an economy that is diversified, we are strong, we are prosperous, social justice. So I need to remember that. I need to remember that. In as much as you want to balance the budgets and to be judicious about it, how do you find space for growth against all odds? And how do you dig down into your faith to ask whether the hidden treasures will be open to you? And so take the chance. And for you to also remember that Ghana, it's a word a friend used today, a catalytic country. And therefore, if you build, people will go onto the streets that you build. So my challenge is to free economic space so that people can use the genius of entrepreneurship that we know that is deeply embedded in us. How am I going to ease or enhance the ease of doing business in our country so that entrepreneurs will thrive? How do I move the SNIT from just 1.2 million people contributing to the 14 or so million people who are employed employed by themselves and doing great businesses, but we've not offered them anything for them to become formal. And in that is what will catalyze and grow our country. How do I begin to pick winners and still to be seen as fair and non-partisan? Yesterday, for example, after just realizing that you're moving into the calculus of the numbers, called a breakfast meeting in the morning with Otabel and Steve Ade and Patrick, and I said, okay guys, what are the bold things we should be doing in this budget? Just to snap you out of that. So you can begin to think out of the box. Because I think we have to take some risk, bold and imaginative risk, to be able to tap into the entrepreneurial skills that we have and what people do to get our products to Angola or Sierra Leone without government's help. And that's my challenge. I have a debt profile which is 74% of my GDP, and therefore with a negative primary balance, I can only pay my interest, and that interest is $2.4 billion a year. And then I'm adding to the stock every day. So you have your revenues, you have your expenditures, and you have your debt. And you need to now begin to tackle these in a way in which the country will be free to be productive. So I need to look at the debt to see how I can eliminate it or elongate it and get lower interest rates. I need to look at the revenue, and immediately, how do you get revenue? You need entrepreneurship. And so even though the question will be asked, how are you going to have tax reliefs when you don't have enough revenue? You have to believe that in giving those tax reliefs, the Ghanaians will respond to the moment, and that by the end of the year, it will turn around. So those are the challenges and risks. As Caroline mentioned, I did work at DataBank, and between Kelly and I, we were able to take certain risks and even eventually depart from the company and let it continue to run. So my prayer is that you pray for me to be to realize that in government there is entrepreneurship, and we have to take risk to be able to get there. So yes, we will take some risk with this budget. We will give the tax reliefs, which seemingly do not make sense when you don't have a lot of money. We will look at our exemptions and see how we can, in a sense, reduce them, which is also counterintuitive. So there are going to be a lot of things that seemingly do not make sense. And then we also need to look at areas that we feel that there's this Ghanaian touch which seems to attract everybody to this nation. So how do I look at the aviation industry? And I guess my question is, if a number of camel herders in Dubai could build that economy, we have no business being where we are. We have a lot more than that.
What technology will do to this country, and I think it's inevitable, is that unless we can increase the skill sets of our people to do more value-added stuff quite quickly, there will be a problem for us in unemployment and crime and all of that kind of stuff. It's already happening with the migration, and the success that we have as a country in improving agricultural productivity will hasten and create a bigger problem for us. Today in the US, the average manufacturing company is using about 6 months to train the people that it hires for them to be able to work independently. 10 years ago it was 3 months. And that's because both the complexity of the job they're doing has gotten a lot higher, and I think there are also problems with the educational system. Who's taking over that role and that responsibility? It's not the government. It's the companies who need the people to work for them. They are the ones who are now saying, before I can let my new hire step on that factory floor and work by themselves, I'm going to train them for 6 months instead of the previous 3. And we as a country can do the same. Not through the government necessarily, because we've seen the government run education in this country for some time. But through companies that are operating in well-regulated areas, being competitive or competing against each other and trying to create excellence out of each other because there's the profit motive and there's competition. And the pension sector is one such example. It's new. We only started operating in 2010. There are 27 companies in the sector. Competition is intense. Nobody knew how to run a private pension prior to that time. We're doing provident funds, but these are slightly different. And yet today you have 27 companies. I'd say about 15 of them are very competitive, operating against each other, providing value and service to Ghanaian companies, utilizing technology. Almost every single person working in this sector is new to it. They've all been trained by Ghanaians in Ghanaian companies. In certain instances, we've brought foreign expertise and foreign capital to enhance these companies. But it's been done in that sector. And I think by freeing private capital entrepreneurship, we don't have to worry about our ability to train people. The companies will be able to do it if the return potential is strong enough or good enough.
Thank you. Martin, Karen talked about serving the sub-region.
Right.
Trying to sort of look at how we get out of here, probably gradually, go into the sub-region and extend from the sub-region into the wider Africa, the wider region of Africa. And what I would ask you as someone working in a company or running a company that has businesses within the sub-region, what are the differences that you see about some of the countries in which your business operates compared to what we have in Ghana, and how you see whether we are anywhere close, we are far behind, what do we need to do to jump over to be able to be like them, so that all your businesses across your group and across the continent are going to operate at similar capacity?
Right. I think what's more striking across Africa and across the region is how similar we are. We all expect that there will be differences, but when you really engage with a particular geography, you find that we are a lot more similar than we are different. And I think Karen made a very good point, which Ken picked up on, which is that entrepreneurs will go where the business is, with or without government support. I remember when I was working at Casapreco and we were trying to penetrate the Nigerian market. We went to the ECOWAS Secretariat in Abuja and spent months talking. Nothing happened. I mean, nothing. We showed them the laws they had signed, everything, nothing happened. But when we connected to Nigerian distributors, everything happened. So we just had to get in, and we said, okay, they won't help us, step aside, we have to do it. And that, I think, is really where the magic lies, is that by empowering and encouraging entrepreneurs, and Kofi touched on it as well when he talks about training, when you encourage entrepreneurs, they will go where, with the best intentions, governments will find it difficult. Because I remember in the Casapreco situation, the Ghana embassy in Nigeria, when the ambassador went with us to ECOWAS headquarters and sat and had meetings, and they talked nicely. And then you get to Ilankuji border, and then everything goes haywire. Everything, because you are 1,000 kilometers from Abuja. The reality is different. Capital O2 in Angola, I would never have thought. But they're making money. And the brand is creating magic. It's an ambassador for Ghana. And imagine if we had been more proactive in nurturing this and managing it and building it, and it will bring in more revenue into the tax net. I don't want to say anything about Capital O2, but most people who trade outside like to leave their proceeds outside. It's a smart business. But if government held you in a loving embrace, you wouldn't have a problem.
Be careful. The Minister for Finance is sitting right beside you. GRA may be doing an audit of your company very soon.
That's why I'm repeating my plea for a loving embrace. I just want to touch quickly on
the loving embrace. Yeah, an easy one. My nickname was Odo in school. So I'll fulfill that.
I just want to quickly touch on something that I can't call him Oko. He's too senior to be.
Oh,
but I think in essence what he was saying was, I'll tell you a story which encapsulates it. I was traveling, and this was in, mid-2000s, early 2000s, and we arrived in Dubai, and I was walking behind two ministers. I think they were deputy ministers. And what struck me was the awe and admiration for where they were. Wow! So we like good things, and we see good things, and we admire them. And they came back to Ghana, and they just went on. So we're not doing enough. We are seeing, we are talking, we are admiring. How much doing are we? And the magic is in the doing.
So, as a panel sitting here discussing 2030 and talking about aggressively moving forward with huge challenges such as we have, maybe Accra Karen can share a little about how she sees us being able to traverse this huge obstacle to be able to ensure that entrepreneurs can actually get to do what they want to do in the way that they should do it to enable us move forward.
That's a big one. Thank you. Yeah, clearly, for most entrepreneurs, industrialists, access to finance, access to low-cost finance is a huge challenge. Let's take it from the point of view of the banks. Yeah? In the main, we are commercial banks. The legislation that allowed us to have development banks, like we had before, no longer exists. We used to have Bank for Housing, National Investment Bank, we had ADB, and I believe even the central bank had a development finance window, which was specifically for providing long-term funding. Now, we as commercial banks now find ourselves in a situation where, in spite of the fact that our own funds are purely short-term, so this is, your savings, current accounts, typically doesn't stay with us for more than 6 months, maybe a year. Except in the case of certain banks which are over 100 years old. A lot of their customers died and left the money for them. But with the newer banks, we have short-term funds. Now, our clients insist that we provide them with long-term funding. They won't tell you the money is going to go and buy equipment. They'll tell you, they're just going to turn it around and bring in 3 months. They end up bringing in equipment that is probably going to, it has a 5-year investment horizon. So then you, the bank, you are stuck with having given somebody a loan that they cannot pay. Loan becomes bad. So your cost of doing business is going higher, and you factor that into your pricing. So for me, if we can go back and look at that policy we used to have that allowed us to have an investment bank that maybe government is going to put money into, and which is going to provide that kind of long-term funding, then it eases things a little for the commercial banks, and we can start thinking about maybe lowering our prices. Not to talk of the treasury bill rate, which is also quite yeah? So all of those things work together to make it a little difficult for us. But I think that if we can work together with the Ministry of Finance, with government, we can come up with solutions, financial solutions that work for everybody.
Can I come in small just to add to yes, Karen is right. The system used to be these commercial banks and what we call specialized or development banks.
Yeah.
So Bank for Housing was there, NIB was there, even Cooperative Bank was specialized. Merchant banks were also identified as such. Then came a regulator coming in and now talking about universal banking license. And once you do that, you put everybody in the same platform. And mind you, each bank has a shareholder. So people are looking always at the bottom line. But when you have specialized banks, you look at instruments like tax system. If it's a Greek bank, what can we do to ensure that people have access to cheaper source of funds from that? It's not a matter of going ahead and giving the money for a Greek at a lower rate and not seeing the end in expansion or volume increase of agricultural products. When you wait and there's a harvest, then we can do an arithmetic and say to ourselves that you benefited so much from the bank, you were able to produce this. So we will go back and do an arithmetic, give you a rebate. This happens in Japan. I saw it happen there when I was there many years ago, 1988. But today it's universal banking license, so everybody is paying the same thing. But a bigger problem also, Karen talked about mismatching. You got short-term money chasing projects with longer tenure. The difficulty we have has to do with bad debts and the understanding of what is a doubtful debt, what is a bad debt, which is regulated by the central bank. When you give a 6-month loan and the account is not fully paid after 1 year, they say make provision for it. It's a bad debt. How can it be bad debt when they refuse to look at the history and activities beyond the payback period or the tenure? So a lot of banks are booking loans that appear to be bad, at least from provision point of view.